The base captain, who was sitting behind his desk in his big looming chair with his back, said,
Well. It seems like we have a problem here, soldier.
He turns around abruptly and slams both of his fists on the table. His eyes were as black as a crow's feathers and felt like they were shining equally blackened rays right at me. I gulped. "Permission to defend myself, sir!" Dr. Crow's Eyes sat himself back down and grouched,
You can try.
"Okay, so here's what happened. I will get my letter if it's the last thing I do," I whispered in front of the door. But before I opened it, I checked behind me just to make sure no one was there. I smiled as I opened the door ever so slowly and then crept in as quietly as possible into the room. "That'll teach you to withhold my mail from me," I said as I took the screwdriver out of my pocket and then unscrewed the mail hinges. Aha! "My weekly letter from Timely Comics!" I exclaimed, but maybe a little too loudly. A mailroom officer slammed the door open, and boy was he furious. "What have you done?" And so there I was, standing in front of my base captain, trying to figure out how I was going to explain to him why I destroyed military property. "Sir, there was a mistake in the mailroom and my letter was overlooked and therefore didn't reach me, sir. When I saw it was there, I politely asked a mailroom officer if he could retrieve my letter and he denied me my right. So I believe I had to take matters into my own hands, sir," I proudly said with my chest out, hoping to appeal to the captain's values. He just stared at me and then let me have it. Walking back to my bunk, you would think that the words Leavenworth Prison would have scared me. But the minute I stepped out of the captain's office, my mind was already on the story that I needed to write to send back to Timely Comics. Okay, who am I kidding? I was already thinking about it when he was yelling at me. The next day, after I mailed the story to the Timely, I headed over to the training film division, where I worked writing manuals, training films, slogans, and occasionally cartooning. I had worked alongside some pretty interesting people: Academy Award-winning director Frank Capra, Charles Addams, who was a New Yorker cartoonist, and a children's book writer and illustrator, Theodore Geisel. You probably know him better as Dr. Seuss.
Private, I don't know how you did it,
said another officer who just walked in.
But a colonel has saved your behind from going to prison.
I smiled and said to him, "My superpower is luck. If you're lucky, everything works. I've been lucky." I was born on the 28th of December, 1922 in Manhattan, New York. My parents were Romanian-born Jewish immigrants that struggled their whole lives to make ends meet. My father was trained as a dress cutter, but spent most of his time buried in the classified section trying to find work. It was the Great Depression, and like everyone else during that time, he struggled to find jobs. I think this was what really gave me my work ethic. My father barely worked and spent so much time looking for work, so it gave me a greater understanding of the privilege of working and working whenever you can. Ever since I was a kid, I always loved to read. I read every single thing I could. Shakespeare, Mark Twain, Arthur Conan Doyle, anything and everything I could get my hands on. I loved everything that was imaginative, high concept, a little bigger than life. It's no surprise I also loved to write too. I realized at a young age that that was what I was going to do. Well, I dreamed of writing the next great American novel, but hey, if you asked me, I got a much better end of the deal. Every job I had as a kid revolved around writing. I even wrote obituaries. Anything I could do to write. Well, I also wrote press releases for the National Tuberculosis Center and sold subscriptions to the New York Herald-Tribune newspaper. I had other odd jobs here and there too, but my focus was always on writing. One day, I got the job that would forever change my life. As I mentioned before, I've been very lucky. My uncle, Robbie Solomon, was working at a company called Timely Comics, and when an assistant job opened up, he asked me if I wanted the job. I couldn't say yes fast enough. I was working directly under my cousin's husband, Martin Goodman, and I was doing the little things to help out the writers and artists. Things like making sure the inkwells were filled. You see, in those days, the artist dipped the pen in ink, so an assistant's job was to make sure they always had ink. I also went down and got them their lunch. I did proofreading. I erased the pencils from the finishing pages for them. It wasn't like nowadays, where everything is all digital, but it was a blast for me. I got to learn and write from everyone that was there. The golden age of comics. It was a magical time. With a work ethic like mine, it wasn't long before I proved myself and my skills and was handed more and more assignments to show off my writing. I even got to do an issue of Captain America. But what was really cool was getting a chance to create my own hero, the Destroyer. It was doing quite well, but before I got to make it even better, the Army came calling. When I was in the Army, I still worked and was able to keep practicing my writing, as I was only one of the 9 men in the Army that got the title of playwright. After I left the Army, I came home, but things weren't the same as when I left it. Timely Comics was now Atlas Comics, but sales were not doing so well. People were no longer interested in comics. It was just viewed as something silly only for kids, and we had strayed so far away from making cool comics about cool superheroes. We were instead doing comics about horror stories, romance, westerns, cops and robbers, etc. Even the writers, including myself, were losing our passion to write and create. And as if things at the office weren't bad enough, the worst thing imaginable happened. My cousin had set me up on a blind date with a model at a modeling agency. Instead of meeting my intended date, my dream woman Joan had opened up the door, and the minute I saw her, I professed my love to her. "You are the love of my life, and I have been drawing your face since I was a child." We were married 2 weeks later and welcomed our first baby girl 3 years later. We were the happiest we could ever be. Unfortunately, not long after, we all had to endure a loss greater than we could ever imagine. Joan delivered our second baby girl in 1953, but she passed away 3 days later. It was the hardest thing to ever happen to us, but we only pulled through because we did it together as a family. The late 50s came and Atlas Comics was on the verge of being shut down. Even I had already planned on changing careers. Then our competition released and received huge success from the Justice League of America. So, as a response, Martin assigned me with coming up with our own superhero team. I had nothing else to lose, so I figured it was time to take some risks. I experimented with creating characters with real-life problems, with actual character flaws, and dealing with the regular issues that everyday people had to deal with. I gave them bad tempers, relationship problems, bickering, melancholy, issues with accepting their roles as superheroes, issues with bill payments. Who would have ever imagined superheroes having issues paying their rent? We wanted to write something that could appeal to the older audience by giving them depth to the characters. Jack Kirby and I put together our first team, the Fantastic Four, and that was that. We were back. As the company began to soar again, it was time to change our identity. We came up with the name Marvel, which is today now known as not just the universe all these cool superheroes are based in, but also a name for a method I and others created, the Marvel Method. The Marvel Method is how we produced comics as fast as we could. I'd come up with the basic description of the plot for an artist like Steve, who'd then take it and he'd be off and running. He'd take those skeleton outlines I had given him and turn them into classic little works of art that ended up being far cooler than I had any right to expect. The art would be magically drawn up, and all I had to do next was to fill out the bubbles. After the success of the Fantastic Four, I realized people love to read characters they can relate to with real-life issues. I collaborated with several other artists to create even more characters. Jack and I created Hulk, Thor, Iron Man, and the X-Men. Bill Everett and I came up with Daredevil. With Steve Ditko, we brought to life Doctor Strange and then our most successful character, Spider-Man. All these superheroes were all based within the same universe, the Marvel Universe. I didn't just write, art direct, and create iconic superheroes, but for years, I got the privilege to respond to the heartwarming letters we received from fans on the back of each issue. I later became the face of Marvel and got to travel to all sorts of conventions, colleges, and panel discussions, and yeah, you guessed it, movie sets. I'm in almost every Marvel movie ever made, and I loved it. I'd go to the set and I'd do my little cameo and I'd meet all the people. It's a great way to spend the day. And then I'd go back to my own world. It had to be definitely one of my favorite things to do. My name is Stan Lee, and I passed away on November the 12th, 2018. I always felt like a very lucky man with everything I had in my life, and all I wanted was to pay the rent. I was 95 years old and never saw a need to retire as long as I was having fun. And to me, what I did every day was the most fun I ever had. Most of you may know, my motto is Excelsior. That's an old word that means upward and onward to greater glory. It's on the seal of the state of New York. Keep moving forward. And if it's time to go, it's time. Nothing lasts forever. This video is sponsored by NordVPN. Please find the link in the description below, together with the special Minute Videos discount code. NordVPN is like a digital superhero, like the Marvel characters, but with some actual special powers to help make the world a better place for you. NordVPN shields your internet activity from hackers and malware, protects you on public Wi-Fi networks, and can even help block annoying ads. Their virtual private network technology protects your IP address and makes sure that no one else can see which websites you visit or what files you download. Also, it ensures you have access to your favorite websites and entertainment content, for example, Marvel movies, which might not be available in certain markets due to license or censorship issues. NordVPN has several cool features to help make your life online easier and more secure. If that sounds interesting, please click on the link below to find out more on how NordVPN can be a digital superhero for you. You can use the special discount code MINUTEVIDEOS to get 75% off 3-year plan plus 1 month free. This is a limited offer for Minute Videos fans and will expire soon. So, we suggest you check it out.